Okay. You want that? No, I want this. Okay. All right. Can anybody hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. You can put your name in the chat if you want credit for being here. We're a little bit early, so we're gonna wait for a minute before I start going into scheduling and things like that. So see how it goes. Okay. Let's see, we got 8 people, so we should have more. Okay. Well, it is what it is. I go this way, like that. That's better. A lot of glare. All right. Okay. Are we almost there? We're almost there. We'll wait a minute or two. All right. So there should be new quizzes open today, a new forum open. I think today is the last day to finish the other forum and the other quiz, so try and get to that. We're at 11 o'clock. Okay, if you just came on, put your name in the chat. We're a little bit light here on participants, but I think I should start anyway. So, okay. So we're recording. Let's look at the schedule, hopefully. What's this? That's not the schedule. But let's try that. Wait, let's do, hold on. I'm monkeying around with stuff. Okay, so let's look and see. I think I've got the schedule there. Okay, so today's February 8th. We're in week 4. I'm hoping everybody sees the schedule. We're covering tissues. Chapter 4 is the tissue level of organization. So we're going to talk about the basic types of tissue and some tissue injuries. And after we're done with that, we're ready for exam 1. Okay. And we actually had 2 days last week where we missed. How many people here, just type in, how many people here went to supplemental instruction on Friday? No? Anybody? Did anybody go? Maybe? Okay. Just give me a thumbs up if you did. No. Okay. All right, 1 or 2 people. All right, well, since we've missed a day, at least 1 day, I think what I'm going to do is move the exam, the first exam, into the next week. So I'll probably have it open, I'll probably open it Sunday afternoon of next week, and it'll be open Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Okay, and you'll have to take it. It'll be an hour long, and at some point during those 2.5 days, you'll have to take it. You can only take it once, so this isn't unlimited tries. This is one crack at it. And so the first exam will come Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. One of those days you'll have to set aside. It will cover chapters 1 through 4, but the meat of that is chapters 3 and 2, and there'll be less on chapters 1 and 4. I'll have some review stuff today, and there's some review stuff online. Since we've missed a day, we're going to have supplemental instruction available on Wednesday and Friday this week. Attend one at least but if you can attend both. And so that's going to be available. Friday is not mandatory because that's Lincoln's birthday, but Caroline has agreed to be there, and so we'll do that. So that's our plan. So Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday for the exam, you'll have one attempt. You'll have an hour available. The exam will contain multiple choice, true, false, and essay questions. The figure 45 questions or so, about 10 per chapter. 2 of those will be essays where you'll have to write a paragraph or 2. Many of those questions you will have seen before, so that you'll have seen them from the quiz, but many of them will be new, and so you won't have seen them before. For today, I'd like to talk about what we're interested in with chapter 4, because not all of chapter 4 will be on the exam. So again, let's share again, and we'll look at the study guide for chapter 4. I'm hoping you see the study guide. Anybody? Yes, thank you. Okay, so here, chapter 4, there's lots of different tissue types, and they're discovering new tissue types even as we speak, because they subdivide existing tissue types and then say, well, this is different because it does a different thing. But we can group tissues into 4 general tissue types: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nerve tissue. Your book goes through about 40 of these. I would like you to know those 4 basic types, where you would find them, what they do. And for lecture, I'm going to limit it to that, is those 4 basic types. What unites all epithelial tissues, what unites all connective tissues, muscle tissues, and so on. And then a couple things about tissue injuries, about inflammation, maybe a little bit about cancer and aging of tissues. So it's not the entire part of the chapter. A lot of that is lab material. And so I'll give you more of that in lab this week. And I might have the lab a little bit, get that stuff up a little later, because I've got to kind of set it up. And so here, kind of, we've gone over a number of kind of the key terms that are associated with the tissues. And then down below, kind of a description of each tissue type: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nerve tissue. And then inflammation is the big one. Inflammation is the most common type of tissue injury. It's a response to injury, actually, but it's you see that in lots of different things, from infections to traumatic injuries to autoimmune type things. You see inflammation, and so that's a big deal, and it shows up again and again. And so those are the big ideas. I won't give you, on this next exam, I won't give you pictures of tissues and say, identify that tissue. That's lab stuff. Typically, that's done with a microscope in lab. This year, it'll be done with pictures from microscopes. But that's lab stuff. But questions about what are the tissues, what do they do, where would you find them? That's fair game. And so look at that. And so if let's stop this share, and we'll go to your textbook. I think I can do that. And so I'm going to go online and look at the textbook. This takes a minute. So I think that's the textbook. Okay. So do you see tissue injury and repair, anatomy and physiology? Yes. So this is a section that's pretty important, this tissue injury section, where they talk about inflammation, the features of this. Lots of different kinds of tissue injuries cause immune cells to release chemicals, and these chemicals are what cause inflammation. And the best known one is histamine. And once histamine is released, that causes more blood to flow to an area. It causes things to leak out of blood, cells and proteins, and these things will cause migrations of further cells, and they'll start fighting infection. And you'll have very activated cells that can actually cause further damage. And so a lot of times we turn down inflammation because we want to promote healing, and inflammation can be quite severe. So this is a really important section, this section that's tissue injury and repair. And so that's nice to look at, and that'll help you understand inflammation. We'll talk about it a lot, and lots of medical care and is managing inflammation. And so it's helpful if you're going to go into almost any medical field, is to really understand inflammation. There's other things here. There's aging, and then there's cancer. And so cancer we'll talk about as well. I'll talk about this more when we talk about the skin, but cancer is just uncontrolled cell division in a tissue. And that leads to masses of cells that eventually can form a tumor, and they can break into other tissues. So this section is important, this tissue injury section. But then the other important things are kind of in the beginning, where they talk about the 4 tissue types, and they talk about where you find them. So this is an important section to kind of study. And so epithelial tissues, there's lots of different types of these. They're found on body surfaces, external surfaces like our skin, and internal surfaces like in our digestive cavity, lining our nasal cavity, lining our respiratory cavities, lining our urinary tract and reproductive tract. Epithelial tissues are very, very active. They form the active part of glands, of any secretory thing is an epithelial tissue. They do lots of absorption. They're very active tissues. And like I say, there's many types. The other big group of tissues are connective tissues. And there too, there's many types. And they all form structures. They connect things. They support things. They're important in storage. They store fat. They store minerals. They're important in transport, blood, a bone, cartilage, fibrous connective tissues. And so they look very different. What they all have is non-cellular material. So you see fibers or solids or liquids between the cells. And in fact, sometimes it's hard to find cells. Epithelial tissues are all cells. Connective tissues have few cells often. And they're less active. Mostly the cells are taking care of the material. And that material is called a matrix. And so you can have a matrix or a ground substance that's material of connective tissue. And we have lots of these, and they look really different. They're, sometimes it's hard to find the cells. Okay. Then the other 2 general types of tissue are muscle tissue and nerve tissue. They're both mostly cells, but there's fewer types. For muscle tissue, it's 3 basic types: skeletal, smooth, and cardiac muscle. Skeletal muscle is really, it's easy to pick out because the cells are striped and are striated. And so it's very strong. But all muscle tissues contract. They shorten, and they use force to shorten. And so they can produce movement by shortening. And so muscles contract to produce movement. Smooth muscles are muscles and organs. Skeletal muscle moves the skeleton. Cardiac muscle shortens around blood vessels in the heart, and it pumps blood. Okay, and then nerve tissue is tissue that contains neurons. They send messages, send and receive messages with little chemical signals, neurotransmitters. There are other cell types in there, but the important cell type is the neuron. And so you find these the most abundantly in brain and spinal cord, but you also find them in the nerves in various places. So I won't have you identify them. I would like you to know characteristics. And so they start giving you the characteristics here, where they form. They talk about the different cell types in here. And so this is the beginning, and then for each type of tissue, there's lots of examples, and they go through that in detail. But I want to give you those details in lecture. That's for lab. Okay. All right. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Okay. So then let's spend a few minutes. Oh, and if you came in late, put your name in the chat. Again, exam will be moved into the next week, still covering chapters 1 through 4. Okay, let's just kind of talk about the exam a little bit. And so I think I want this one here. So I don't have a, there should be a review PowerPoint showing. Yes, anybody? Okay. So for anatomy and physiology, one of the biggest problems is there's all these new words that have very specific meanings. So I would look over for each study guide the list of keywords. I would look over the section at the end of each chapter that lists vocabulary words to make sure that I'm familiar with as many of those as possible. Lots of this is just knowing what these words mean. Lots of the questions are, do you understand these words? Okay, and so that's a big thing. Okay, we've got about a week now before the exam, and let's see here. This is not an IQ test. It's not about who's smart. It's about who's studied and who's practiced. And the more you practice, the better it'll be. And so you have a week to kind of practice. Don't do it in one night. Try and spread it out, and you'll remember it better if you spread it out. And so success is something that's really preparation, and you can do it. And particularly if there's enough time, use your textbook, whatever notes you take during watching the Moodle stuff. You have a supplemental instructor, you have your classmates you can work with. And so that can be helpful. You have lots of resources that you can use. And that's really important, to be able to draw on more than one resource. Since we have a week, it would be good to spend a little time each day reviewing each chapter each day for a few minutes. With memory, we know how people form long-term memories, and that's repetition and spaced practice is what's really important. And so it's important to study the night before, of course, but it's also important to have spaced practice. And so small chunks of practice repeatedly, particularly over a week, and then accelerating as you get to when you're going to take the exam. It's also, I'm a procrastinator. I procrastinate. It helps me prioritize things. And so I can study harder and harder as it gets closer to the time. But I can't study 24 hours the day before. Usually if I can get 2 or 3 hours in the day before, that's probably the best I can do, because I've got other things going on. I got family members, I got dogs, I got work, I got all these things, and you've got that same stuff. And so spread it out. That's really helpful. Okay, and then we also know that hands-on activities are best, that reading's good, but writing is better. Summarizing, answering questions, quizzing is really helpful. Talking about it with peers, that's helpful. Those are really, really good things. Okay. So, and if you're stressed, a little stress is okay. It's a reminder that you should get started and that it's important. How do you know when you have too much? Well, Too much is if you have distracting thoughts, if you're distracted even when you're trying to study. And there is help available on campus. I can direct you to help. We have counseling on campus. You can relieve your stress by sometimes studying, but other times exercising or doing an activity that's calming. But if you're having a lot of distracting thoughts, that's kind of the key thing. Okay, so then I've got this little PowerPoint here that kind of goes over some of the important slides. Okay, from chapter 1, really the most important thing in chapter 1 is the idea of homeostasis and negative feedback. The body functions to maintain a relatively stable internal environment, that we have small internal fluctuations. It's not constant, it's fluctuating, but the internal fluctuations are much smaller than the external fluctuations. And the body uses systems to maintain that, and that's helpful. Our cells only can live within these small fluctuations. The best way that we have of maintaining homeostasis are negative feedback systems. These are the control systems, where you have a sensor or a receptor that detects change. It notifies a control center, and that control center can turn on effectors to counteract the change. So negative feedback means counteracting change. Okay, it works like a thermostat. Okay, the thermostat detects. You set the thermostat at a set point. When the temperature falls below that, the thermostat turns on the furnace. And the furnace runs for a while, brings the temperature back up. Then when it gets into that good range, the thermostat turns off the furnace and temperature is allowed to gradually fall back. And we have these fluctuations. Okay, right now, our furnaces are running hard because we want to keep the temperature within the house, kind of close to a nice temperature for us, even though it's very, very cold outside. So our brain is doing the same thing with temperature, but it's also doing it with, our need for food, water, our need for energy, all those things. We're doing that. Okay. Chapter 1 also has a huge amount of anatomical terminology. That's more lab stuff. I will ask a few questions. I'll ask about anatomical position, probably directional terms, but I won't be, asking you to name 10 body regions or something like that. That's lab stuff. You should know what a body cavity is and a serous membrane. But this is less important, and it's more likely to be something that's lab related. Okay. Things like the organ systems, I'm not going to ask too much about that because we'll get to that later. Okay. Chapter 2 is important. Chemistry is important. We often get to chemical levels of organization. You should have an idea about what an atom is, what an element is. Those are important things. I'm hoping you get more chemistry elsewhere. So I'm not going to ask too much about it. I'm not going to ask you to, how many atoms does beryllium, or how many protons does beryllium have, or iron. I'm not going to ask that. It would be more basic: carbon, oxygen, hydrogen. Those are types of things. Should know what the different types of chemical bonds are. The outer electrons interact, and you can have ionic or covalent bonds. Ionic is transfer of electrons. Covalent bonds is sharing. Okay. Water is an important chemical. Okay, you are about 60%, 60 to 70% water. Okay, so water is an important part of chapter 2. The properties of water, the unusual bonds, the polar covalent bonds, that's important. Chapter 2 also has a nice section on organic molecules. That's important. We're going to talk about those. They're large and complex, not as abundant as water, but more important because they do stuff. Okay, and they all have carbon hydrogen bonds. Okay, there's glucose, fructose, sucrose. Okay, the importance, there's lots of important organic molecules. Lipids, proteins are important. Proteins fold up and do lots of important things like form enzymes, receptors. Nucleic acids. Okay, these are the genetic material, DNA or RNA. They store the information that's needed to make proteins, or they're involved in making proteins. So we're doing that. So chapter 2, some basic chemistry. What is an atom? What is an element? Chemical bonds. And then water, organic molecules. Chapter 3, cells. We're made of cells. Okay, cells are the smallest living parts of the body. We have lots of different kinds of cells. Cells are made of smaller, non-living structures that are chemical in nature. These are the organelles. Particularly important, the plasma or cell membrane, the nucleus, ribosomes, and mitochondria. You know, those are the 4 really big ones. Yeah, maybe the cytoskeleton, maybe endoplasmic reticulum. You know, I'm not going to ask about 20 organelles or list me 10 or anything like that, but I might ask you about those 4, about what those 4 do. And they're found, those 4 are in all cells. Okay. Cell activities in cells. You know, the DNA, all cells have DNA, and they all use it to make proteins. And they do this transcription, translation. That's a primary activity. Okay. And this is why all cells have a nucleus. All cells have ribosomes, because they're all making protein. Now, they may make different proteins. That's that differentiation process. And that's why we have skin cells, liver cells, brain cells. Okay, those cells all have the same DNA, but they're using different parts to make different proteins. And that's why those cells are different. This is a really crucial thing. Okay, the cell cycle. Okay, this is the cells are, another activity cells do is they are capable of reproducing. Okay, and so this is how they do that, how they control it, those stages they go through. And then today, these 4 tissue types. Okay, epithelial, connective, muscle, and nerve tissue. So, you know, and they talk about organs are made up of tissues. And so simple organs are made up of, you know, a membrane, which is usually an epithelial tissue, and then a connective tissue. All right. And then the inflammation and repair. So these are the slides I think that are more important. I have on the Moodle page this week, there's a practice test. You can look at that. That's about half the length of the real test. Has some sample questions. You can do that. Caroline will go over that later, I think Wednesday. I'm going to put some sample essay questions there. That should show up later today. There's a quiz and a forum and that kind of stuff. Okay, Caroline, do you want to say anything?
I don't think so. We'll go over the practice exam on Wednesday, since that's the day we actually have class, and then just whatever extra time we can do some practice and just bring your questions. And then Friday, any questions you have, otherwise we'll just do exam review that day too.
Okay, all right. Anybody? Tampa Bay? Yeah, Kansas City? Anybody watch the Super Bowl? The commercials were lame. I didn't really see any good commercials. I don't know. Anyway, okay. All right, so exams will open Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Okay, set aside an hour. Okay, you only get 1 shot at it. Okay, so that means you've got to make sure that you're sitting there, that you know, your family is locked out and you've got good internet access. Okay. Yes, Wednesday Zoom, 11 o'clock for practice. Lab will be at home, so there'll be, again, stuff posted online. I will have a lab kit for you soon to pick up, and that will have some experiments for you to do at home, but that's probably not going to be the next week. And stuff will be posted tonight online, tonight or tomorrow morning. Okay. Anything else? Okay. All right. So Wednesday and Friday, supplemental instruction, same time. I will hopefully hear from Carolyn that people are doing that, and we'll see you next week. Okay.
Are you gonna
Go ahead.
post? Are you gonna post today's lecture on Moodle?
Today's lecture, I can. Yes, I can.
Okay.
All right. All right. All right. Okay. Thank you. See you later.